these things are going to disappear real quick because this conversation that we're having is exactly the same way. That's why I want to do the show, because these are the things that have always been interesting to me. When like you came up and we're on Tryon Street and you're showing me this, the mill stones that you're bringing up.
I got a ticket that day.
I'm not shocked.
Damn people. I can't believe they keep those things on a golf cart and she's running around looking. She's like, if you don't, we're gonna tow it. I'm like, I'm only like 2 minutes over.
Greg Johnsman first learned the art of making grits as a teenager from third-generation miller Jack Brock while they worked together at the Michelin Tire Factory in Greenville, South Carolina. Jack shared his secret to creating perfect grits by taking the time to mill a flavorful variety of corn by hand the old-fashioned way. A few years after Greg and his wife Betsy returned to her family farm in Edisto Island, he bought a 1945 mill and separator that had sat unused in a barn for nearly 40 years. Today, Geechie Boy products are served in more than 40 restaurants around the state, shipped nationwide, and are served in all 4 of Charleston's James Beard Award-winning restaurants, Fig, Husk, McCrady's, and Hominy Grill.
Greg, it's nice to finally make it out here, brother.
Good.
This is big now.
It's a work in progress.
So the building that's out here, we first pull up, that was what you were originally milling in?
Yeah, I mean, it was just our roadside market. It was just an opportunity to just add one more product to the family's business. This whole place was my father-in-law's partner's original business, the Geechie Boy. That was his nickname, and Mr. Raymond owned the place. And as they grew vegetables, it was another outlet. And that's what we started. My wife's family's been in the commercial tomato business for 45 years this year, and we closed the doors officially this year. Not in a bad way. It's just based on the shipping lanes and the decrease of that commercial crop around here. So in the meantime, we extended on top of all the vegetables. We were extending the grains, which is my background that I brought to the table. Not the growing side, but the processing side. And we've been kind of blessed that it's kind of grown.
How'd you get drawn to it, milling? People ask me, like, how'd you end up doing pottery or something like that? It's like, well, how did you end up doing this stuff?
Well, it's kind of crazy. Everybody's got their nuances. Or as a kid, I started memorizing the serial numbers to mills. I met a third-generation miller named Jack Brock, and he had 3 boys, and they all helped him, but I just kind of was drawn in more. And it was something to do. It was something to hang out. I guess other people in high school were partying, and I was hanging out with old guys restoring mills. I mean, I just thought it was exciting and fun. Everything from tractor shows to just milling. So I never knew I was learning anything. And I think I didn't think it was a artisan thing. I didn't think it was anything unique. It was just somebody had some corn they wanted to grind to help grind it, but I didn't know that the entire time he was taking me under his belt and he was constantly showing me the Babbitt bearings. So we still pour old Babbitts on these mills. So I don't have modern bearings. So we pour the metal, which is a different viscosity, kind of different metal. So one's softer than the other. So he literally was just showing me, this is too hot. This isn't, when you need to oil it, when you need to grease it. And I didn't think anything about that. And now I guess people don't even know that exists anymore. They don't know the bearings exist. They don't know that there's a heat threshold. And if they did, they'd probably grab some laser temperature gauge, and all I do is stick my hand on it, because he just slowly, just like how fast and rates on the stones and when to adjust stones. Because the thing with a stone is that you're wearing them down constantly. Whatever it's adjusted today is not where it's going to be. And I'd say on corn is softer, so it sounds crazy, but I'd say we resurface all stones about every 1,000,000 pounds, which sounds like a lot, but 1,000,000 comes quicker than you think.
Especially with the amount that you guys, when you're telling me how much you've grown, like number-wise, from when you and I first started dealing, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but right, so what you're now milling in a day is what you were milling in a week 6 years ago when I first started dealing with your product.
Basically, yeah, and I mean, it's been the help of yourself and other chefs in that way, and them entrusting us. I mean, so we use all these antique mills, and it's not because I'm completely loony and crazy, but it is a slower process. Yeah, a little bit. But it's a slower process. So what it's doing is everything about, I'm not trying to cook the natural oils and sugars. So I can't improve upon, nor do I need to improve upon that technology. It's just a matter of being patient. So we're trying to now, not only are we preserving the art of milling, but we're trying to preserve the actual varieties that have the flavor that chefs can taste the difference. I was selling vegetables to chefs, and because of the family's background, and the chefs would come to me and say, have you heard of this? And I'd start growing it, and I'd try to grow anything. And then we started integrating these grains in, and now, almost 10 years later, I don't grow any vegetables anymore because I just don't physically have the time. But I'm trying to kind of do what they call the old rice kitchen. The idea is that each grain crop works off each other to improve the soil. So it's in a rotation base that we're actually helping the soil, you know? So for instance, the peas are nitrogen fixing, the rye is nitrogen fixing. So a lot of that crop, I'm not trying to harvest for the chef, I'm trying to put a percentage back into the ground, so it's improving for the next crop to fall on the next crop. So it's not like I'm creating all these new products, I'm just trying to improve the soil in that rotation. But the chefs have helped evolve it with a demand, and we're starting to get into retail for the same reason. So people get to eat it at your place or another restaurant, and then all of a sudden they're like, how do I get it? And they're contacting us direct. The mills I'm using are what they're called general store mills, or they're called portable mills. There's nothing portable of a 2,400 pound mill, but the idea is every little town had a mill. And every little town, when you'd go to get your groceries or get, you know, the farmers, whoever would take the corn there, and the guy that taught me had a tariff scoop, and it was his grain. What that is when you brought the corn in, he would mill it in the store for you. You'd pick up as feed, as food for your family. And then whatever scoop amount he took out was then what he sold to the lawyers, doctors, whoever in town. So he never got paid by the farmer for what he milled. It's just he kept a percentage and then he sold it to other people. But these mills were the center of the community at one time. And it's kind of exciting to think about it and then think, can we get people not only to think about that part of, you know, people coming together instead of sitting on Facebook or something and not knowing anybody anymore, you know, that you can, you know, talk and whatnot, but also to bridge the gap and for people to experience that taste and say, well, this doesn't taste, you know, there is a difference, you know.
It's a huge difference. So what happens when you, like with some of these old machines, when you, like a part breaks? Do you have to scour the internet? Do you have to fabricate
It's not really internet. I keep a fair amount of stuff. And Meadows Mills is still in business, and there are parts they don't even have. I've literally given some of my parts to them so they could recast them, so other people could have a part. I mean, it's literally at that point.
Wow.
The wood and all you have to remake on the early mills. The cast pieces, when they break, and I know 3 or 4 pieces, so when you first met me and we were running one mill, I think I cried many nights because if we went down, I had to stay with it till I fixed it. So that's why I needed a duplicate, just in case if something broke, I had something to fall back on. But there's, just like anything else with new vehicles, how they change, same things occurred. So you could be in 1938 and you get a 1940 mill and you're excited, it's the same size, but all the parts are different. Yeah. So you're not helping yourself. So it's a contrast, and you start to learn what to look for. And anybody that calls me and says they have something old, I usually go and look at it. More than likely, it's never what they say they have. It's hilarious because so many times they think they have an old mill, and I mean, I could tell you story after story of what I've gone and looked at, and from forges to sawmills to. But it's still exciting, and it's exciting to keep everything going. So it's and I try to trade stuff out. If I can't use it and somebody entrusts it to me, then if somebody's a blacksmith and I want, you know, if they can use it, I'm not asking for money, but if they got a piece that they're not using, you know, let's switch, let's do something and help everybody out. But it's just like seed. Any seed that can come to me, it's like Christmas morning, you know, to see if it's a possibility of a strain worth looking at and bringing back.
When do you open up your museum?
That's what everybody always asks. We've talked about, we've been blessed that chefs come out and they'll cook on the property and stuff, just, you know, fundraising stuff. And if I had the extra money, my dream would be to build a barn just to put everything in so people could kind of walk through, and especially kids. We used to do you-pick strawberries, and it amazed me next to our farmer's market, you know, they'd say, where are those coming from? Like right outside the door, like right there.
Right there.
Like, and they're like, that's how a strawberry grows. And so if I could do the same on a milling for people to understand just old corn shellers so the kids could actually just shell the corn, because they don't have, some people don't have that concept. And why is it dry? They're thinking of sweet corn. I'm like, you can't mill sweet corn on a stone. It would be mush. But we do have enough, all the equipment. It's just a matter of putting a facility together, and then it would be good to double as, you know, for meals and dinners and other stuff. But that pipe dream needs about $500,000. So anybody that wants to, you know.
Anybody got it?
Anybody got $1 million,
got a
half million, I'll take it.
2 people with a $500,000.
Yeah,
they'd be
I'm
better.
fine with that.
Partners are
But, you
good.
know, it'd be nice to post and beam. And I mean, it's not that it's sad, but there isn't enough education for people. I mean, I learned from a guy that I didn't know I was learning from, a process. And I got 2 little boys, and my older one, Victor, literally has slept next to the mill when I was milling, when I was doing everything myself. And that lolling noise is like a tractor or a diesel truck. It just kind of puts you to sleep. So, you know, he wasn't in danger's way, but he was close enough that he was around, and my wife would be helping me and stuff when we were doing the business all by ourselves. And so he's had a chance to see it, and it's kind of the same way, but he might, and my other son might, I got a 4-year-old, they might not have any interest, but there's hopefully somebody working here that will continue on collecting all this crazy stuff and moving it forward. But I mean, it does take someone's vision, and that's what my father-in-law started when I started farming. He's like, you have to have a vision, and I have, and that is part of it, is protecting this stuff, and we've been just blessed to have families step forward. And I mean, it is crazy how they find me. I mean, honestly, I mean, I had a guy, like you said, drive through on vacation, and his friend sends me a chinny pea that was from his uncle from the Civil War, and had all the history, and we went through the paperwork, and then and I do have the resources, you know, with professors and all, that we can get it DNA tested and to make sure it's not just made up, and see if it is something, and then try to plant it and go from there. And same with equipment. We value people coming forward, and like, again, I'm 39, but the guys that taught me are late 70s, 80s, 90s. They've realized they can't take it with them.
Right.
And I'm finally at the point going, I was so excited in my early 30s trying to keep everything, and now I'm like, if it's not something we can use and restore, what am I going to do with this?
Right.
I mean, I don't need to see it rot down. If there's somebody else that can use it, it's not going to rot down, I want to work with somebody else too. So that's what we try to do. I tell the families, honestly, if we go look at something, I'm like, listen, you know, I can only pay you X amount, but it's going to take me this amount to restore it, but I am going to use it. And it's exciting. Families get to come. Like when we started up the flour mill, they're all named after, so that's a funny story. So I name after all the mills after who I got them from.
Okay.
So Mr. Chalkley was where I got this red mill out of Georgia, and I was so excited, and his family comes, and my wife is red, so they name it Ruby because it has to be a girl's name. So I lose the man's name, and then we had this old gentleman died of cancer. I got his mill out of Florida from his wife, and it's all silver. And he had every picture with him with the little 70 tight shorts on with a silver bullet sitting on top. So I was like, well, that's silver, so it's called a silver bullet. And they're like, well, that's Roxanne. So I'm like, y'all are killing me, ruining all the names of my mills and all.
The family had a name for it called Roxanne?
Yeah. That's they renamed it. It had to be a nice girl name. It couldn't be the silver bullet and stuff. But they come, and then the families get to see them when we restore them. And I mean, it's not a fast process. The first mill took me almost 2 years by myself. And now I don't have the time. My dad's got Parkinson's, but he's really good with wood. He's a retired engineer, and he works at a place in Greenville, South Carolina called the Woodworkers Guild. So I'll drop a piece off with him, and a bunch of guys will just help him out, and they start restoring the piece, and it eventually ends up back in my hands and stuff. So it's exciting to get other people to kind of help get into it. There's certain things I got to fine tune and tell them exactly how it has to be done.
Right.
But a lot of the other process, there's other people that have kind of come into the family somehow.
And what do you do? So when you refinish the mills, do these go back to the family, or are these things they've entrusted to you?
They all stay here, and I always tell them that, and I'm honest with them. If I'm going to spend that amount of time, I've had families say, could you restore it? And we just want to keep it in our family. I'm like, I just don't have the physical time. I mean, I can get you a hold of, I know 2 or 3 guys that do that for a living, and I'll get them in touch with somebody, but I was like, I also know what they charge, and I'm just being honest with you. And some families do it, and some let them rot down and don't want me to ever, and other families are honest. They're like, if you put it back into, we just want to see it run again. It was my granddad's. I just want to see it do something again. And we'll send them some grits or whatever we make with it or flour just so they can see, and they get excited in the family. And just like people grow a small amount of corn, they'll bring it to me, and I'm always honest again with them. You know, if it's full of weevil or something, don't bring it on my property because I can't infect my mills over. But if it's something, you know, the old way of milling, we still do that. There's not a lot of people that still grow their own corn, but if they do, we still help and mill for people that way. And we keep a separate mill for that and all. But it's, again, coming back to that general store, kind of that community atmosphere. And that's the exciting thing, is to meet these people and kind of bring it full circle. One of the funniest things that ever happened is when I first got my first cell phone, I called my wife. It's like, you got to get over here and check this out. And she comes over thinking I'm hurt or something's wrong. And I'm like, look at this nail I found. She's like, you called me for a lousy nail. I was like, but you don't understand. So on a cyclone fan is designed just to do that. It creates a cyclone to indirectly help separate things. And there was this nail below it where you would catch the brand or unwanted. And there was a nail only on one side. So I was gonna, like when I'm restoring equipment, at that point when I was restoring equipment, I'm always like trying to fix everything perfect. And I left the nail thinking I had to put another one to hang a bag or something. So one day by chance, I just hung it on that nail that was there, and it propped the whole bag at a 45 instead of straight. Well, if you think about it, what did it really do is it recreated the airflow. Instead of just cycling straight down, it created and changed the airflow. Well, we looked into the separator, the piece of equipment that was separating out the grits, and the grits were twice as clean. So I'm flipping out over a lousy nail, and my wife's like, what is it? And then I explained it to her, and she was doing the same thing. She's like, oh my gosh. And I was like, what you did is some miller before me figured out how to fix this problem. So now I say that any piece of equipment that gets here, like not only do we photograph it, I'm like, all right, you see that screw? Don't anybody remove it. There must be, now none of the other stuff we've ever found has been helpful, but there's a reason for the madness. So it's exciting. So it's so cool to think that 2-3 generations before me, someone was running the same piece of equipment, and I'm literally holding their hand, you know, doing the same thing. So that's the exciting thing, is just figuring out how it runs. Every single one runs a little different. Every single one has a little trademark different. Now that creates a problem when you're working with multiple chefs and restaurants. So I have to use a lot of other tricks and ways to either resharpen the stones, or what do I have to change to create that same kind of trademark, same for every single one. So that's what we've had to do, is look and scour and figure out ways of keeping it consistent, because I want you to have my grits today or in 10 years and you're gonna think you're getting the same thing.
The interesting thing of doing this project and getting able to get caught up with guys and gals that have supplied me over the years that have been at least down here has been that, you know, these people are part of, like, they're part of my family's history. And like that's the weird, I think for me was sort of the weird thing as a chef, because I mean I have people that have been cooking in Charlotte for 17 years, and like they consider my food sort of like their food, you know what I mean? And you don't think about it that way until somebody brings it to your attention, and it's like, it's the weirdest way that we connect, but it's the most obvious, is like through breaking bread, right?
Yeah, but that's the hardest thing about being a miller. I put myself as farmer as low because of how much knowledge the family has, but I get chefs that call me, like the French Laundry called me, and they're like, well, tell us how to cook grits. I was like, who would tell the French Laundry how to cook grits? And let alone, you know, one of the chefs that worked in town at McCrady's is how we got out there, and that's how these things happen. And but I'm not going to tell a chef how to cook grits. I'm not a chef. I mean, like, I know how I cook them for my boys, you know, or my wife or my father-in-law or whoever, but like, I don't also cook. I have respect because I have restaurants. I don't have the scale. You know, it doesn't scale the same. It doesn't work the same. You don't just, well, you add so many cups of water and then you cook it for this long, because some of them are cooking in pressure cookers and some of them are cooking, I mean, rice cookers. Everybody's got all the, so anyways, I'm like, But I'm shocked at how many calls I get from people I like look up to and read their cookbooks, and they're like, well, tell us how you would prepare this product. I'm like, Alex Garancelli on TV, we work with her restaurant Butter in New York, and she has been a blessing to us, and she calls, and she called me one time, and I'm like, you got to try Jimmy Reddick's, this new grits, and I'm sending you, and she calls me, she goes, if you ever send me something for free again, I will never talk to you again. I'm like, what? I'm like, I sent you a sample because I want you to try it and think about using it. She goes, no, I believe in who you are, and I want to support your family.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real changing point for me to hear somebody say that, because I always felt no one knew we existed here on the little island, and it's hard for them to understand the time we put in. So it's really cool to have somebody to be like, if you ever send me something free again, I'll never talk to you again. Because when you first hear that, you're like, what did I do wrong? They're like, nothing. It's just, I want to help you. I want to support your family.
Yeah, nobody, I mean, because the thing is, I think in this industry, I think the people that are involved with it understand how fragile it is. You know, you can, again, you always want to plan for, 3 or 5 years down the road, but the reality of the situation is that sometimes things happen.
To find that chef that wants to help tell the story is what's important to me. And it is, because we work long and hard hours, and it's not financially rewarding a lot of times. It's to get someone to call or write a letter to thank you for a memory or thank you for the flavor. It is all worth it.
I agree. I think that's a great way to end this conversation.
Awesome.
Greg, thank you so much for having us out today, brother.
Anytime. Come back.
We're going to have to. Now that you got this spot opening up. All right, find a camera point, wave it. It makes Pete happy. Bye, Pete.
Oh, that one, because he said don't look that way.
You just wrecked the scene. That was our outtake. Pete's like, no, Jeff will be the judge of that.